Welcome back to our channel, where we share incredible stories of resilience, justice, and human triumph. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss the powerful stories we share every week. Today's story will restore your faith in justice and show you how one person's principles can change everything in a single day. Picture this, a luxury shopping district in Manhattan, where designer stores line the streets like glittering jewels. The kind of place where a single handbag costs more than most people make in a month. Among these prestigious boutiques stood Meridian Luxury, a store so exclusive that it didn't even display price tags. If you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the staff moved with the practiced precision of people who knew their clientele had more money than patience. But this isn't just a story about wealth and luxury. This is a story about Dr. Emma Richardson, a woman who had spent her entire life proving that greatness comes in all forms. Born with achondroplasia, a form of dwarfism, Emma stood 4 feet 2 inches tall, but her presence filled every room she entered. At 35, she was one of the youngest tenured professors at Columbia University, a best-selling author, and a philanthropist whose foundation had funded scholarships for thousands of underprivileged students. Emma had earned her doctorate in behavioral psychology by age 28, published groundbreaking research on unconscious bias, and delivered TED Talks that had been viewed millions of times. Her book, Beyond Assumptions, had topped the New York Times bestseller list for 12 consecutive weeks. She drove a custom Tesla, owned a penthouse overlooking Central Park, and had a personal net worth that would make most CEOs envious. But more importantly, she had something that money couldn't buy: an unshakable sense of dignity and a heart full of compassion for others who faced discrimination. On this particular Tuesday morning in October, Emma was on a mission. Her younger sister Sarah was getting married in 3 weeks, and Emma wanted to find the perfect gift, something that would capture the love and pride she felt for her sister who had always been her biggest supporter. Sarah had mentioned admiring a particular designer's work, and Meridian Luxury was the only store in the city that carried this exclusive line. Emma had called ahead to ensure the piece she wanted was in stock. She had even provided her credit card information to hold the item, a stunning platinum and diamond bracelet worth $47,000. The sales associate on the phone had been courteous and professional, confirming that the bracelet would be waiting for her and that they would have it properly gift-wrapped. What Emma didn't know was that this simple shopping trip would expose a ugly truth that had been hiding beneath the polished surface of this prestigious store. She didn't know that her visit would set in motion events that would rock the luxury retail world and send shockwaves through the business community. She certainly didn't know that within 24 hours, this store would be closed permanently, and its story would become a cautionary tale told in business schools across the country. As Emma's driver pulled up to the gleaming storefront, she felt a flutter of excitement. She had worked hard for everything she had achieved, and being able to give her sister such a meaningful gift filled her with joy. She stepped out of the car, her custom-tailored designer suit perfectly fitted, her confidence radiating like sunshine. She had no idea that she was about to walk into a situation that would test every ounce of her strength and dignity. The afternoon sun reflected off the store's floor-to-ceiling windows, and Emma could see the elegant displays inside. She had shopped in stores like this hundreds of times before. She knew the drill: the careful attention, the white glove service, the respectful treatment that came with being a valued customer. What she was about to experience, however, would be unlike anything she had ever encountered in her successful life. This is the story of what happened when prejudice met its match, when ignorance collided with justice, and when one woman's quiet dignity sparked a revolution that would change everything. Stay with me, because what unfolds next will shock you, inspire you, and remind you why we must never judge a book by its cover. Emma pushed open the heavy glass door of Meridian Luxury, and immediately felt the cool, air-conditioned atmosphere embrace her. The store was exactly as she had imagined: pristine, elegant, and intimidating in its perfection. Classical music played softly in the background, and the scent of expensive leather and subtle perfume filled the air. Display cases showcased jewelry that sparkled like captured starlight, and designer handbags sat on individual pedestals like precious artifacts in a museum. At first, everything seemed normal. Emma approached the reception desk, where a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair was arranging some paperwork. "Good afternoon," Emma said with a warm smile. I'm Dr. Emma Richardson. I called earlier about the Cartwright diamond bracelet. I was told it would be ready for pickup. The receptionist looked up, and Emma immediately noticed the subtle shift in her expression. The professional smile flickered for just a moment, replaced by something that looked like confusion, then discomfort. "Oh," the woman said, glancing around nervously. Let me get the manager for you." Emma had seen that look before, that moment of uncertainty when someone tried to reconcile their expectations with reality. She maintained her composure, having learned long ago that grace under pressure was often the best response to awkward situations. "That would be wonderful, thank you," she replied, her voice steady and pleasant. The manager who approached was a tall, thin man in his 40s, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. His name tag read Richard Hawthorne, store manager, and his expression was a masterclass in poorly concealed disdain. He looked down at Emma with the kind of patronizing smile that made her skin crawl, the same smile she had seen from people who thought they were being kind while being anything but. "I'm sorry," Richard said, his voice dripping with false politeness, "but I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. We're a very exclusive establishment, and our pieces are quite expensive. Perhaps you would be more comfortable in one of the stores down the street? There's a lovely little jewelry shop about 3 blocks away that might have something more suitable for your budget." The words hit Emma like a physical blow, but she had faced discrimination before and had learned to respond with facts rather than emotion. She reached into her designer purse and pulled out her black American Express Centurion card, a card so exclusive that it required a net worth of at least $10 million to qualify. "I believe you have my bracelet ready," she said calmly. "As I mentioned, I'm Dr. Emma Richardson. I called this morning and provided my credit card information to hold the Cartwright piece." Richard barely glanced at the card, clearly dismissive. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but we can't have people like you in here making our other customers uncomfortable. This is a high-end establishment, and we have a certain image to maintain. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The store had fallen silent. Other customers, all of them tall, traditionally attractive, and clearly wealthy, had stopped their browsing to watch the scene unfold. Some looked embarrassed by what they were witnessing, while others seemed to nod in approval. The staff members exchanged glances, and Emma could see in their faces that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Emma felt a familiar fire building in her chest, not anger, but something far more powerful, a determination to stand her ground with dignity. She had not climbed to the heights of academic success, built a multi-million-dollar foundation, and become a respected voice in her field by backing down from bullies. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm a paying customer who made a legitimate purchase. I want to speak to your corporate office." Richard's face flushed red, and his voice rose slightly. "I don't care if you have $1 million in your pocket. You're making our customers uncomfortable, and I won't have it. Security will escort you out if necessary." He gestured to a large man in a security uniform who had been standing near the entrance. What happened next would later be described by witnesses as a masterclass in dignity under pressure. Emma straightened her shoulders, looked Richard directly in the eye, and spoke in a voice that carried across the silent store. "I see. So you're refusing service to a customer based on physical appearance. You're discriminating against me because of my height and assuming I can't afford your merchandise despite evidence to the contrary. Is that correct?" "I'm not discriminating," Richard sputtered, but his words lacked conviction. This is a business decision. We have the right to refuse service to anyone." "You do," Emma agreed, pulling out her phone. "And I have the right to document this interaction. I also have the right to contact the Better Business Bureau, the New York State Division of Human Rights, and every major news outlet in the city. But before I do that, let me ask you one more time, will you provide the service I've already paid for?" The security guard had approached, looking extremely uncomfortable with the situation. Several customers had begun filming with their phones, and Emma could see staff members whispering anxiously to each other. The tension in the store was palpable, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Richard's response would change everything. Get her out of here. Now. What he didn't know was that Emma's phone had been recording the entire conversation. What he didn't know was that one of the customers filming was a prominent journalist. And what he definitely didn't know was that Emma Richardson wasn't just any customer. She was connected to people who could make or break businesses with a single phone call. The next 24 hours would teach Richard Hawthorne and Meridian Luxury a lesson about the true cost of discrimination. As Emma was escorted out of Meridian Luxury, her mind was already working 3 steps ahead. She had spent years studying human behavior, understanding the psychology behind prejudice and discrimination. This wasn't just about a shopping trip gone wrong. This was about a systemic problem that needed to be addressed. But what Richard Hawthorne and his staff didn't know was that they had just made the biggest mistake of their professional lives. Emma sat in her car for a moment, collecting her thoughts and reviewing the recording she had just made. The conversation was crystal clear, providing undeniable evidence of what had transpired. But before she did anything else, she needed to make a phone call that would change everything. She scrolled through her contacts and found the number she was looking for. Michael Chen, CEO of Chen Holdings, one of the largest retail conglomerates in North America. Michael wasn't just a business acquaintance. He was someone Emma had helped during a crisis 3 years earlier when his company faced a discrimination lawsuit. Emma's expertise in unconscious bias had saved his company millions of dollars and helped them implement training programs that transformed their corporate culture. Emma. Michael's voice was warm with genuine affection. What a wonderful surprise. How are you? I'm well, Michael, but I'm calling about something serious. Are you familiar with a store called Meridian Luxury in Manhattan? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Intimately familiar. Chen Holdings acquired the company 6 months ago. It's one of our premium retail properties. Why do you ask? Emma felt a surge of hope mixed with determination. Michael, I need to tell you what just happened at your store. Over the next 10 minutes, she detailed every moment of her experience, playing portions of the recording for him. She could hear Michael's breathing change as the story progressed, and when she finished, there was a long silence. Emma, I am mortally ashamed, Michael finally said, his voice heavy with emotion. This is exactly the opposite of everything we stand for as a company. This is exactly the kind of behavior you helped us eliminate from our organization. I'm going to handle this personally, and I'm going to handle it today. What Emma didn't know was that Michael Chen had grown up poor, the son of immigrants who had faced their own share of discrimination. Building his business empire hadn't made him forget those experiences. It had made him more determined to create companies that treated everyone with dignity and respect. The idea that one of his stores had behaved so despicably made him physically sick. Michael, I don't want you to fire people just because of me, Emma said. But this is clearly a training issue, a culture issue. Your manager made it clear that this kind of behavior was normal for them. Emma, you're too kind, but this goes beyond training. This is about fundamental human decency, which apparently isn't so fundamental after all. Can you meet me at the store in 2 hours? I'm flying in from Chicago right now. Meanwhile, word of the incident was already beginning to spread. The journalist who had filmed the encounter, Rebecca Martinez from the New York Herald, had recognized Emma immediately. Rebecca had written several articles about Emma's work and knew her reputation. She also knew a story when she saw one. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the video of Emma's experience had been uploaded to multiple social media platforms and was beginning to go viral. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive of Emma, with many people sharing their own experiences of discrimination in high-end retail stores. #dignity shopping and #respect all customers began trending on Twitter. But the real game changer came when Rebecca Martinez published her article online at 5:30 p.m. The headline read, Renowned professor and philanthropist discriminated against at luxury store. CEO calls behavior mortally ashamed. The article included Emma's background, her accomplishments, her net worth, and the full recording of the incident. It painted a picture of a woman who had overcome every obstacle life had thrown at her, only to be treated like a second-class citizen by people who couldn't see past their own prejudices. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Emma's phone began ringing non-stop with calls from reporters, supporters, and other business leaders expressing their outrage. The store's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments and calls for boycotts. Local news stations picked up the story, and by the evening news cycle, it was being discussed on national television. At exactly 6 p.m., Michael Chen walked into Meridian Luxury with Emma at his side. The store was nearly empty. Word had spread quickly among their usual clientele, and no one wanted to be associated with the controversy. Richard Hawthorne's face went white when he saw them enter together. "Mr. Hawthorne," Michael said, his voice cold and professional, "I'd like you to meet Dr. Emma Richardson, the customer you refused to serve this afternoon." "Dr. Richardson, this is Richard Hawthorne, the former manager of this establishment." Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He clearly had no idea who Emma was or what she represented. The reality of his situation was beginning to dawn on him, and the color drained from his face as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. "Sir, I didn't know. I thought." Richard stammered. "You thought what, exactly?" Michael's voice could have cut glass. "You thought it was acceptable to discriminate against a customer based on their physical appearance? You thought it was good business practice to make assumptions about someone's worth based on their height? You thought you had the right to humiliate someone in my store?" Emma watched the exchange with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She felt vindicated, yes, but she also felt sad that it had taken her connections and status to get justice. How many other people had been treated this way by Richard and his staff? How many had simply walked away, their dignity bruised and their day ruined, with no recourse available to them? The revelation that Emma was connected to the store's owner was shocking enough, but what happened next would ensure that this story became legendary in business circles for years to come. Michael Chen stood in the middle of his own store, looking around at the elegant displays and polished surfaces that now felt tainted by what had occurred there earlier. His jaw was set in a hard line, and Emma could see the wheels turning in his mind as he processed not just what had happened, but what it meant for his entire organization. "Mr. Hawthorne," Michael said, his voice deadly calm, "in the 6 months since Chen Holdings acquired this store, how many customers would you estimate you've turned away based on their appearance?" Richard shifted uncomfortably, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Sir, we only maintain the highest standards for our clientele. We have to protect the brand image." "That wasn't my question," Michael interrupted. "How many people have you discriminated against in my store?" The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Emma watched as Richard's eyes darted around the store, looking for support from his staff, but they had all found sudden interest in their shoes or the merchandise displays. Finally, one of the younger sales associates, a woman named Jennifer, stepped forward. "Mr. Chen," Jennifer said, her voice trembling slightly, "I've only worked here for 3 months, but I've seen Mr. Hawthorne turn away at least a dozen customers. Usually, it's people he decides don't look like they belong here. Last month, he refused service to a young man who turned out to be the son of a prominent real estate developer. The month before that, it was an elderly woman whose jewelry he assumed was fake, but she was actually wearing a $2 million vintage Cartier collection." Another employee, emboldened by Jennifer's honesty, spoke up. "He's been teaching us to pre-qualify customers based on appearance. He said it saves time and maintains the store's reputation." Emma felt her heart sink as she realized the scope of the problem. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was a systematic pattern of discrimination that had been going on for months, possibly years. How many talented, successful, worthy people had been humiliated in this very spot? Michael's expression grew darker with each revelation. "Mr. Hawthorne, you're terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the premises, and you'll receive information about your final paycheck and benefits from HR. You will never work for any Chen Holdings property again, and I will personally ensure that your behavior here today becomes known throughout the luxury retail industry." But Michael wasn't finished. He turned to address the remaining staff members, his voice carrying across the store. "Ladies and gentlemen, effective immediately, this store is closed for a complete operational review. Everyone will receive full pay during the closure, but I want you to understand something. The behavior that happened here today is not just morally reprehensible, it's also financially devastating. Emma watched, fascinated, as Michael shifted into full CEO mode. This was a man who had built an empire by understanding both human nature and business realities, and she could see him connecting the dots in real time. Dr. Richardson, Michael said, turning to Emma, would you mind if I shared some information about you with the staff? I think they need to understand exactly what kind of customer they turned away today. Emma nodded, curious to see where he was going with this. Dr. Emma Richardson is a tenured professor at Columbia University, a best-selling author, and a philanthropist whose foundation has donated over $50 million to educational causes. Her personal net worth exceeds $25 million. She shops exclusively at high-end retailers and typically spends between $200,000 and $300,000 per year on luxury goods. She has over 2 million social media followers and is regularly featured in major publications. Michael paused to let that sink in before continuing. More importantly, Dr. Richardson serves on the boards of several major foundations and regularly advises Fortune 500 companies on diversity and inclusion. She has connections throughout the business world, the academic community, and the philanthropic sector. In other words, she is exactly the kind of customer any luxury retailer would want to cultivate a relationship with. The staff members looked increasingly uncomfortable as they realized the magnitude of what had happened. But Michael still wasn't finished. But here's what really matters, he continued, his voice softening slightly. Even if Dr. Richardson had walked in here with $5 in her pocket, even if she had been wearing thrift store clothes, even if she had no connections or influence at all, she still deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. Every human being who walks through those doors deserves that, regardless of their appearance, their perceived wealth, or their social status. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. In all the years she had faced discrimination and prejudice, rarely had she heard someone articulate so clearly what basic human dignity meant. The financial cost of today's incident will be enormous, Michael continued. The negative publicity alone will cost us millions in lost revenue. The legal fees, the settlement negotiations, the damage to our brand, it all adds up. But the human cost is incalculable. We've hurt someone who deserved better, and we've reinforced harmful stereotypes that have no place in civilized society. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. This is Michael Chen. I need you to prepare a press release announcing the immediate closure of the Meridian Luxury Manhattan location for comprehensive diversity and inclusion retraining. Also, I want you to start drafting a public apology to Dr. Emma Richardson and an announcement of our new company-wide anti-discrimination policies. And get me a meeting with our entire executive team first thing tomorrow morning. As Emma listened to Michael handle the crisis with swift, decisive action, she realized that something remarkable was happening. This wasn't just about one store or one incident. This was about a leader who was willing to take immediate, costly action to ensure that what happened to her would never happen to anyone else. The next 24 hours would see Meridian Luxury shut down permanently, its staff enrolled in mandatory training programs, and Michael Chen's entire retail empire implementing new policies that would become the gold standard for inclusive customer service in the luxury retail industry. 6 months after the incident that would forever change the landscape of luxury retail, Emma Richardson sat in her Columbia University office, looking out at the campus where she had spent so many years fighting for equality and understanding. The experience at Meridian Luxury had been painful, but it had also catalyzed changes that extended far beyond a single store closure. The immediate aftermath had been swift and decisive. True to his word, Michael Chen had shut down the Manhattan location permanently, but not before investing over $2 million in comprehensive diversity and inclusion training for every employee in his retail empire. The former Meridian Luxury space had been transformed into a community center that provided free financial literacy and business training to underserved communities, a project that Emma had helped design and Michael had funded. Richard Hawthorne's termination had indeed followed him throughout the industry, but in an unexpected twist, he had reached out to Emma 6 weeks after the incident. His call had been hesitant, embarrassed, but genuine. He had asked if he could meet with her to apologize in person and to understand what he had done wrong. That conversation, which had lasted 3 hours in a small coffee shop near Columbia, had been one of the most meaningful interactions of Emma's life. "I've been thinking about that day every single day since it happened," Richard had told her, his voice thick with emotion. "I grew up in a small town where everyone looked the same and thought the same way. I never questioned my assumptions about people until you forced me to confront them. I realized I've probably hurt dozens of people over the years without even realizing it." That conversation had led to something remarkable. Richard had enrolled in diversity training programs, begun volunteering with organizations that supported people with disabilities, and eventually started his own consulting firm that helped luxury retailers examine their unconscious biases. He had become one of the most effective advocates for inclusive customer service in the industry, precisely because he understood the mindset that created discrimination in the first place. The ripple effects of that October afternoon had spread throughout the business world like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Emma's story had been featured in Harvard Business Review, become a case study in business schools, and inspired new legislation in several states that strengthened protections against discrimination in public accommodations. More importantly, it had sparked conversations in boardrooms across the country about the real cost of discrimination, not just the legal and financial costs, but the human costs and the missed opportunities that came from judging people based on appearance rather than character. Emma's phone rang, interrupting her reflections. It was Sarah, her sister, calling from her honeymoon in Italy. "Emma, you'll never guess what happened today," Sarah said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "We were shopping in this gorgeous little boutique in Florence, and the owner recognized me from the wedding photos you posted. She said she had read about what happened to you and that it inspired her to examine her own business practices. She's implementing new training for her staff and wanted me to tell you how much your story meant to her." Emma smiled, thinking about how one moment of prejudice had somehow transformed into a global conversation about dignity and respect. The bracelet she had originally wanted to buy for Sarah had eventually been delivered by Michael Chen personally, along with a handwritten apology from the company and a donation to Emma's foundation in Sarah's name. "That's wonderful, Sarah. I hope you're having an amazing time." "I am, but I wanted to tell you something else. The owner asked me what you would say to someone who was facing discrimination, and I told her what you always tell me, that dignity is something no one can take away from you unless you let them." "Was that right?" Emma's eyes filled with tears as she remembered all the times throughout her life when she had faced people who tried to make her feel less than she was. "That's exactly right, Sarah. Our worth isn't determined by other people's limitations or prejudices. It's determined by how we treat ourselves and others, how we contribute to the world, and how we respond when life tests us." After ending the call, Emma opened her laptop and began working on her latest project, a book about the power of turning discrimination into transformation. The working title was "When Dignity Meets Prejudice: How One Moment Can Change Everything." The book would tell not just her story, but the stories of Richard Hawthorne's transformation, Michael Chen's leadership, and the dozens of other people who had been inspired to examine their own biases and behaviors. It would explore how discrimination, while painful and wrong, could sometimes serve as a catalyst for positive change if people were willing to learn and grow from it. Emma's foundation had received over $3 million in donations following the publicity around the incident, money that had been used to fund scholarships, diversity training programs, and research into unconscious bias. The Emma Richardson Institute for Inclusive Excellence had been established at Columbia, offering courses and consulting services to businesses wanting to create more welcoming environments for all customers. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome had been the letters and emails Emma received from people around the world who had experienced similar discrimination. Many told her that her story had given them the courage to speak up when they faced prejudice, while others said it had inspired them to examine their own unconscious biases. As Emma worked on her book that evening, she reflected on the lessons learned from that difficult October day. Dignity, she had discovered, wasn't about never facing discrimination. It was about how you responded when you did face it. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about creating systems and cultures that prevented others from experiencing what you had endured. And transformation wasn't just possible for victims of discrimination. It was possible for perpetrators too, if they were willing to do the hard work of honest self-examination. The story of Meridian Luxury had become more than just a tale of discrimination and consequences. It had become a story about the power of courage, the possibility of redemption, and the way that one person's dignity in the face of prejudice could create ripples of positive change that extended far beyond anything they could have imagined. Emma Richardson had walked into that store looking to buy a gift for her sister. Instead, she had given the world something far more valuable, a reminder that every person deserves to be treated with respect, and that sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination is simply refusing to let it diminish your sense of worth. The luxury store was gone, but the lessons it taught would last forever.